Auzubillahi minash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students and viewers. Welcome to English Corner. This lesson is for the course English 4103 Research Methodology. Indeed, it is equally important for students, researchers, and professionals. In this lesson, we will discuss different elements of a research proposal. Be it academic or professional, a research proposal has to have some compulsory elements. Though all the elements are not equally suggested in all the institutions or offices, some elements are common. Besides, your supervisors or funding organizations may select the elements or format for your research proposal. So you have to be very careful about the elements of a research proposal. So let us start with the definition of a research proposal. Research proposal is a document stating the overall plan of a research project or a project. As in a research proposal, you say that what you will do, that is why it is written in the future tense. A research proposal sets out the topic to research, like what it would try to achieve, following the objectives and what would be the potential findings of your research, and how you will conduct the whole process, that is the methodology, and how you will utilize the available resources and time. It also states how the results that you might find through this research will fill up the knowledge gap or lacuna, that is the gap between the existing knowledge and the knowledge that you think needed or necessary. It also states implications, that is how it will be used by the stakeholders and who will be benefited by the results of this research. A research proposal is written for a number of purposes. Primarily, a research proposal intends to convince others that your project is worthwhile and that you have the competence and the work plan to complete it. And of course, another important purpose of a research proposal is to convince the funding agency or the sponsor or the government maybe. The researcher convincingly presents that the problem is significant and worthy of study. The technical approach is novel and likely to yield possible potential results, and they are the right individuals to carry out and accomplish the work. Here are the common elements of a research proposal, but you can have plus or minus features. Title, abstract, background and introduction, problem statement and research questions, objectives, literature review, methodology, significance of the study, limitations and delimitations of the study, operational definition of terms, budget and work plan, conclusion, references and appendices. Let us have brief description. Title. The title should be a short, it should be precise, and it should be focused. There should be some key phrases or key ideas in the title. A title is not normally written as a sentence, it is written as a phrase, and all the content words are capitalized. Content words refer to noun, adjective, verb, and adverb. And in a title, you should not use any abbreviated word or abbreviation. For example, the economic impact of the coronavirus, a study on the poor families. Abstract. Abstract is a summary of the whole research. Here, it is a summary of the whole project, what you are going to write or present in your research proposal. It provides the research problem and or main objective of the research. It also indicates the methodology to be used. It presents the main possible findings or potential findings. But as you are not writing an abstract on the whole thesis, so you may have no findings as well in the abstract. You should also write about the implication and conclusion. And the length of an abstract may vary depending on the size of your proposal. Normally, an abstract should have 150 words. It can have, say, at best 300 words, but more than 300 is not recommended. Background of the study. It provides readers with the background information for the research reported in the paper. It also establishes a framework for the research so that readers can understand how it is related to other research. It's a kind of narrowing down to your topic. Introduction. Introduction lays the broad foundation for the problem that leads to the study. It creates readers' interest in the topic. Introduction places the study within the larger context of the scholarly literature and reaches out to a specific audience. Then comes the statement of the problem. The problem statement describes the context for the study, and it also identifies the general analysis approach. A problem statement is a clear description of the issue or issues. It includes a vision, issue statement, and method used to solve the problem. The 5 W's, that is who, what, when, where, how, etc., can be used to spark the discussion, to start the discussion about the problem. A problem statement expresses the words that will be used to keep the effort focused, and it should represent a solvable problem. Statement of the problem is probably the most difficult section to write. So, what you can do in your statement of the problem, you can try to include answer to these questions. Why do you consider the idea or keywords as a problem or researchable? Why does some particular aspect of the keywords hold importance? Which related aspects have already been researched? On which considerations you consider it a problem? What can your research offer to the existing knowledge regarding the key ideas? Does the literature support your keywords? By using 5 W's, you can form your SOP, like who. For our example, we can answer the questions like who, the poor families of Bangladesh, when, after the attack of the virus, or say post virus attack, where in Bangladesh, or it may be a district of Bangladesh, what economic impact, why, because the poor families are the most vulnerable, they need help, and their size is very large, and their importance in the economy is also great. Following your statement of the problem, you can pose some research questions. A research question poses a relationship between two or more variables, but phrases the relationship as a question. For each keyword in the title, you should form a question. And remember, research questions are always a WH question, it does not start with an auxiliary verb like do, does, are, etc. You can add research question or questions at the end of your statement of the problem, or you can have it as a separate section. Sometimes research questions, the section on research question can come after the literature review. Research objectives. Research objectives say what is to be achieved by the study. Objectives should be closely related to the statement of the problem, and there are two types of research objectives. General objectives, which states in general terms what is to achieve by the study. The second one is specific objectives, where you break down the general objective into smaller, logically connected parts. And they address the key variables of the title. That is, a key idea or a key variable can have a number of variables, and you should address all the variables, important variables, in your specific objectives. After having formulated a good research questions, you should form research objectives. They are to explain the way in which such question or questions is going to be answered. Objectives are usually headed by infinitive action verbs such as to reveal, to unfold, to understand, to identify, to establish, to determine, to estimate, to develop, to compare, to test, etc. For each question, if you have two questions, then you can have two objectives. So for each question, form an objective. Do not consider more than one keyword or idea for one question. They should refer to your research questions. Then comes literature review, which provides the background and context for the research problem. It establishes the need for the research and indicate that the writer is knowledgeable about the area. Through literature review, the researcher shares with the reader the results of other studies that are closely related to the study being reported. It relates the study to the larger ongoing dialogue in the literature about a topic, filling in gaps and extending prior studies. It also provides a framework for establishing the importance of the study as well as a benchmark for comparing the results of a study with other findings. Literature review should be brief and it should be to the point. The literature selected should be pertinent and relevant, and it should relate to the key points clearly and succinctly. Common errors made in literature review. There are some errors which we find our students committing in literature review, like the review isn't logically organized. It is not focused on most important facets of the study. If review doesn't relate literature to the study, sometimes there can be too few references or outdated references cited. So you should use up-to-date literature or up-to-date text or up-to-date references. Sometimes review isn't written in author's own words. So remember, literature review is done by you, so you should write it in your own words. Sometimes review reads like a series of disjointed summaries. It is not, literature review is not disjointed summaries. Rather, you are writing a very cohesive and coherent section having the knowledge, stating the facts found in different researches. Sometimes the review does not argue a point. So every research, every part of your literature review should argue a point. And references sometimes are not recent. It should be recent indeed. The more recent, the better. And of course, in your research proposal, you should state methodology. In methodology section, you can have a number of aspects like design of the study, what type of research it is, or approach. What approach will you follow for conducting this research, like experimental or qualitative or quantitative, etc. You should talk about population and sampling, that is your respondents, and what portion or which portion of the population you are going to study. You should talk about research instruments or research tools like questionnaire, content analysis, discourse analysis, say FGD, interview, or say task analysis, etc. In your methodology section, you should also talk about pilot study. And pilot study is an important aspect of your research instrument validation. That before finally using your research instruments to collect data, you should pilot your instrument to see whether they are workable or not, whether they are valid, reliable or not. So you should ensure the quality of your tools by checking the reliability and validity of your instruments. And you should state in your methodology section how you will do this. What measures will you take to ensure the reliability and validity of your research instruments? You should also talk about data, different types of data, and sources of data like primary, secondary, and also how you will collect the data. Then you will also state in your methodology section your plan of data analysis. And nonetheless, you should talk about how you will present the data or data presentation procedures. Then you can add another section called chapter outlines, and it is not mandatory, but it is suggested. And you can have as many chapters as your research necessitates or as your supervisor or institution suggests you to have. But normally, in a normal academic research, there should be at least 3 chapters. And in addition, you would have the core chapters based on your objectives. For the beginners, it can be said that you should have a chapter for each objective. So if you have 2 objectives, your report will have 5 chapters. Like introduction, then you can go for a theoretical framework or literature review, and then you can have methodology, and then you should have 2 core objective based chapters, like one chapter based on objective number 1 and another one on objective number 2, and then finally you can have conclusions and suggestions. Instead of the chapters 4 and 5, say if you don't want to have 2 different chapters on your 2 objectives, then you can have only 1 chapter. You can include all the discussion and results in 1 chapter titled Results and Discussion. Again, you can have a separate chapter on literature review and or theoretical framework if your research demands. And if you don't want a separate chapter on theoretical framework or literature review, then you can include it in your introduction chapter. So in that case, your chapters might look like this: introduction, theoretical framework, methodology, results and discussion, conclusions and suggestions. Then in your research proposal, you should state significance or rationale, which indicates how your research will refine, revise or extend existing knowledge in the area under investigation, and how such refinements, revisions or extensions may have either substantive, theoretical or methodological significance. Think about the implications, how results of the study may affect scholarly research, theory, practice, educational interventions, curricula, counseling, policy, etc. How the findings can affect the life of the people or stakeholders. Can it provide solution to the problems? Or can it provide any innovations? So you should think of all these things, and you should include discussion in your rationale section, significance section, and you should support that your research is worthwhile and your research will do something for filling up the knowledge gap. Limitations and delimitations. Limitations identify potential weaknesses of the study. Think about your analysis, the nature of self-report, your instruments, the sample, and you can find some problems with these processes. Think about threats to internal validity that may have been impossible to avoid or minimize, and you should explain them. For example, there can be less time than you need for doing a good research, or maybe you cannot afford necessary sources or resources to support your study. So you should explain all these things in your limitation section. On the other hand, delimitations address how a study will be narrowed in scope. It explains the things that you are not doing and why you have chosen not to do them. The literature you will not review, and why not? The population you are not studying, and why not? The methodological procedures you will not use, and why you will not use them. So in delimitations section, you should talk about what you are not doing, and you should support or you should give ground why you are not doing or you are not considering those aspects. You should also limit your delimitations to the things that a reader might reasonably expect you to do, but that you, for clearly explained reasons, have decided not to do. Then you should give operational definitions of key terms or definition of key terms, where you should define the variables, terms, etc. Here you should provide operational definition of the terms that are unusual and unfamiliar. And then you should identify the concepts, tests, or participants introduced in the statement of the problem. And you can do this, you can go for using an established definition, or you can go for using a new definition. But the question is why, and what would be your new definition? For example, what do you mean by economic impact? Different people may have different definition of economic impact, but you should state which aspect you are going to cover in your research paper or research regarding economic impact. Which aspects of economy, family, social, macro, micro, are you going to consider? What do you mean by poor families? How, by calorie intake or per capita income, are you going to define their being poor? Next section is ethical or legal consideration. If in your research you are going to use or you have to use some human or animal participants or objects, then you should take consent from the legal authority, or you should take individual consent. So you should go for consent taking, or some human beings may voluntarily participate in your research. And of course you should not deceive them. You should be as open as possible. You should brief them. You should clearly tell them what you will do, and you should take care of the confidentiality of the data collected. Then the next section is time, work plan or schedule, where you should give the sequence of various activities, and your research should meet the time frame of the program or project, and the schedule should be viable. Here is an example of a work plan or time plan or schedule. I'm not going to describe this, but you can have a look at this and you can have your own idea. The next thing is budget. How much money will you need for conducting the research, and what will be the sources of the fund? Again, here is a table about the description, items, and amount of money, and you should say where from you would collect or raise the fund from. Finally, conclusion. It is a conclusion of the whole project. I mean, so far you have written in your project proposal, and you should explain how other parts like methodology, literature relate to your objectives, and of course it should be written in the future tense. And again, in conclusion as well, you should talk about the implication of your research, and you should state how the stakeholders concerned will be able to be benefited or will be benefited by the results if your research is conducted. And then you should have your references and appendices. In references, you should cite all the sources that you have used or you have read as per the stylistic or as per the style you follow. There can be a number of documentation style like APA, MLA or Chicago, but always cling to only one. Do not follow more than one in one single research. And in your appendices, add some important materials lists which you feel the readers might have interest in or you used at the end of the report. So that is all about the elements of a research proposal, and I hope that you have understood them, and I'm sure that you can customize them to make it useful for your own purpose. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.